Good afternoon, sir.
Can you see me?
Yes,
Yeah. Nice to meet you, Munib and Ali Salar.
pleasure to meet you as well. So currently, as of now, we're the only two members of our group who are available for this call.
Sure. Yep.
Okay, so that's a bit about yourself. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you. What about you? How's your day?
Our day is going great, sir. Thank you very much. So before we begin, can you
Great.
give a bit of a background of upon yourself?
Sure. Do you want the video or can I switch off the video? Because if you guys are not, I can also switch it off.
We
Oh, sir,
would
it's
prefer
fine.
the video.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Fine. So my name is Adnan Falak, and I've been working with Australian Aid in the development sector for last 10 to 12 years. Mostly for last 10 years, my assignments have been overseas. So I've been worked in a number of different countries, supporting the Australian development objectives. And right now I'm in Cambodia, Phnom Penh, and I'm here advising the Australian government development program on various economic reform agendas, actually.
Okay, that's quite impressive, I must say. Anyways, the purpose of this call is to ask you a few questions in regards to the issues that social media can pose to the young people's mental health and overall well-being. So before we begin, I was wondering if you could get your consent to record this video for educational purposes.
Yep, you have my consent.
Okay, sir, thank you. So I believe it's best we get into questions now. So the first question is, according to your experience, how would you describe the overall impact of social media platforms on the mental health of young people?
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing the questions in advance. That kind of gave me an idea about what this conversation would be about. So I think overall it is both positive and it is negative. In terms of positive, I think we all know in terms of the individual as well as the social, there's a lot more connectivity, there's a lot more information flowing, there's also a lot more transparency, there's a lot more exposure. That all, obviously, all of that has positive and negative aspects to it. And especially in terms of the exposure, in terms of the growth, when you see what is happening around you, when you are exposed to different ideas, when you are exposed to different thoughts, and basically you are basically exposed, you are in your living room, but you are exposed basically to what is happening around you, actually in the whole world. So I think in terms of the intellectual growth, in terms of the mental growth, so that's I think one of the big positives. Second is obviously it also allows you to connect. Not everyone can connect equally socially. So I think those especially young people who struggle to connect socially in real life, social media obviously allows them to reach out to people and form the connections. Now, having said that, there are obviously certainly there is negative aspects to it, and the question obviously is how do you weigh or how do you balance the negatives versus positives? And in terms of the negatives, I would say that overall, it is the lack of meaningful experiences and lack of meaningful connections. I think that is what probably the social media is is creating. And then we have the specific the um, intellectual biases, mental biases that can obviously come in. Then we have the anxiousness, anxiety related, I guess, mental issues. That also there's a lot of research now. I guess that backs that hypothesis. And then obviously it's the sleep aspect also, and overall mental well-being. So I think overall there are all obviously there are positive aspects of it, and then obviously there are negative aspects of it.
Okay, sir, thank you. Now on to the next question. What are, in your opinion, the biggest ways social media has affected young people's physical well-being?
Physical well-being. That's a good question. And frankly, if you ask me, I would say that a lot of what you are physically is part of how you are mentally. So I don't see, I don't. That's for me. Again, I'm not an expert in this field in terms of the psychology or in terms of the physical aspect. But for me, the psychology, the mental aspect, as well as the physical aspects goes. There's a very strong connection. If you have stress, if you are anxious, if you don't have a proper sleep, if you are constantly comparing yourself with others, if you don't have meaningful connections, social connections with others, then specifically that is going to have impact on your physical health also. More or less, it is the same as effects which we can see in stress. Although stress is a very mental concept, but you can very easily see that prolonged exposure to stress has many physical outcomes also, and many of them are negative. You can start from people getting more vulnerable to all kind of metabolic issues because of the constant stress, because there is certainly wear and tear. And again, how stress is related to social media, I would say, again, when you are getting all these kind of negative news, and especially we have seen in last couple of years how the wars have been brought into very close contact, the conflicts have to be very close in contact with the people, that has given rise to anxiousness. Then I think another aspect is the constant comparison and the dissatisfaction which you feel with your peers. So that also, again, if it leads to any kind of mental anguish or any kind of mental anxiety, that is going to have negative repercussions. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of information about overall physical well-being. There's lot of information about nutrition. There's a lot of information you can get through social media about what is working and what is not working. So at the same time, when you have all these negative aspects, you also have access to the positive information, which obviously you can see that what your peers are doing, what is working for them, and what social media influencers, many of some of them are really good, what is working for them, and you can obviously adopt some of those, and we all use some of those best practices for our mental as well as physical well-being. So it is, again, it's I would say that it has both pros and cons. I think largely, at least in my, I would say that most of the physical consequences would emanate from the mental impact of social media, and I think that's the connection, I think, which we cannot kind of uh, uh, sever. It has to. It is already there.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. That was quite insightful. The next question is, how do popular social media platforms affect young people's self-esteem?
That's a good question, actually. I think in terms of the self-esteem, we can say that again, it is the age. One is obviously is that to what extent uh, is it children, and then it's the adolescents, and is it teens, and is it after teens. So it one obviously depends on who basically is the what when we call up youth, what do we mean by youth? Are we talking about anyone who is up to 16, 17, or if it's beyond 17, 18 also? But I think there's a lot of research now also has
So our
especially.
specifics, I believe what we meant to mean by young people is people above the age of 12 or 13 who are like in their teenage years.
Yeah. So in terms of, obviously, see, the uh, we as humans, we comparison is very important to us. That's how we are wired psychologically. We don't usually go for very specifics, very should I say measured way. Science, like the scientific measurement, as we say, is not very intuitive to human beings. We, on the other hand, we have been wired psychologically to compare ourselves with our peers, compare ourselves to our environment, compare ourselves to where we were before and we are right now. And in that, because we are wired in that way, and the social media probably is also has been kind of organized in that way that it hits our psychological points, and that is the whole business model. So when we are comparing, obviously, when we are looking at in terms of what others are doing, and all of us try to put the best aspects of our life on social media. So if I am looking at, and especially at the very formative age when you are forming your opinions about, and you are not very confident about your place in the world, your place in life, when you have all these pressures, which at that stage you are trying to figure out basically where do you belong, and how do you belong, and how do you fit in. If you have that constant stream of images and information where you see that there are similar people in the similar age groups, or even if aspect of life which is much different than you are living, or you can afford, or if there's something wrong with you, then obviously that is going to have a negative self-esteem. And even this is obviously the kind of exposure to that information is huge. For instance, in North American Canada, I know in Canada, Canadian schools, many Canadian schools, they don't even, because of self-esteem issues, they don't even share the results of the entire class, with the entire class. Each student get their individual transcripts, and this is in these schools, not before high schools. And the reason is that if you ask teachers, they say that because we don't want the self-esteem. Obviously, your performance is your performance, but we also don't want to hurt your students' self-esteem, especially the kids' self-esteem at that level. That is why we don't put it out for comparative, for comparison. So, in terms of self-esteem, I think yes, that is a big challenge, and especially the age group which you have mentioned. That's where when people are usually the kids are usually trying to form their worldview, and it takes 10 more years before that worldview can come into place. And at that stage, if you already have a self-esteem issue and lack of confidence, then that is something which is going to go throughout. That's going to be with you throughout your life, and then that always have other psychological implications as how you form relationships, how you behave at workplace, how you behave in family, how you behave with your peers. And then it's again going to have second order and third order consequences. So yes, I think that's something which is of a real concern, I think, especially to the parents.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. So now the last question which I will be asking you is, in your opinion, what are the greatest dangers posed by social media for young people's mental health?
So I think mentally, I would say there are three or four things. One is that we humans have evolved as social beings. So it's a million, if hundreds and thousands of years of evolution, and we drive meaning in our lives through connections, to connecting with other people. That's the real connection with friends, with families, through interactions. So if you take away that, and you isolate that in through only mobile phones, then you would see that that's going to have negative mental consequences, which can have more anxiety, more anxiousness, more, even leading up to depression. And there are studies. For instance, there is a study which I came across some time ago, that 2 to 3 hours of social media leaves some of the teenagers up to 20 or 30% more isolated, more anxious. So there are kind of couple of studies done in Europe and in UK specifically. So one is obviously is that we drive meaning of our life through our relationships, and if we are just online, then that is kind of, although that is short circuiting, or that is giving you an illusion of connection, but that's not the real connection. uh, this is also in terms of lot of what is popping up with the dating apps, because dating apps are also kind of a social media. And in dating apps specifically, although I'm a little bit transgressing, but you can see the commonality is that in dating apps also, the men and women who are there to date, they are unable to form meaningful connections because they have a lot of choices. So because of that, that is one of the biggest problems, and the dating apps want to keep it that way, and like the social media apps also want to keep it like that. So one is obviously that the deprivation or the lack of long, meaningful connections. The second, I would say, from mental aspect, is the lack of focus, especially at the age group you have mentioned. Now, if you have constant stream of 1 minute, 30 seconds, short doses of these stream of images, which keeps you excited with all these sights and sounds, and have these dopamine kicks on and off, that creates a lot of problem when you are trying to focus on long tasks. So reading, for instance, book reading, you would need to have a long period of time. Understanding of issues thoroughly is require you to read an article which is 30 minutes long, and that might have exciting, interesting, boring aspects to it. And then obviously, when you are talking about life, there are many tasks which are very mundane, but you have to give constant attention to it. So I think attention deficit, and this is again some of the studies that have been done are saying this, that attention deficit is going to be one of the consequences of all of this exposure to the social media, especially to the youth, especially to the kids, because they will not be able to retain their develop this habit of focusing. And if you don't develop that habit of focusing, then that is going to have implications on your productive life, on your career, on your understanding. Because nowadays, even I know kids who are getting information from TikTok. So we know, obviously not, it's not a blanket statement, but we still get most of our information from the newspapers, from the journals, especially good sources of information. And then obviously there is an analytical aspect also, because you need to understand that. So now I think not only focus would become a casualty, but also the understanding and the depth of understanding, which again you need as an individual, as an intellectual growth, which is very pivotal, especially as you go forward from your for your childhood to teens to adulthood life. So obviously, second would be the lack of focus, and then third, I think, is the sleep. So I think sleep, probably among young people, it is usually not, because you have a lot of energy at that stage. Sleep is not one of the priority, but sleep on the long run has a lot of impact on your well-being, your mental well-being, as well as your physical, and then your performance at work, as well as your relationships. And again, this is I think that very there's a lot of evidence that blue light exposure, just only the physical exposure to blue light coming from your mobile phone, from any other source, is going to affect your sleep. That's not a good sleep hygiene. And then obviously, all the constant streams of the information, if that keeps you up, that keeps your mind active, that affects your sleep. Again, that is the same effects which stress has on you, because stress also, if when you are in a stressful position, your mind is in a very active state, and you might have the similar kind of, you might have problem sleeping. So for me, it's overall your meaningful experiences. I think that will have a negative mental aspect, mental consequence. Then you have the lack of focus, lack of understanding, sleep, and lastly, it's also the biases. So when you are, again, from psychological point of view, you have to, if you want to make good decisions, you need to be cognizant of different biases that can influence your judgment. But and if you get same kind of, because this is the model of social media. The business model is to give you what you want more and more, basically, and more exciting, so that you spend more time on social media, and hence that is how they make money. And if you are only getting one side of the story, because that's what the algorithm is picking up, then you are completely divorced from the other aspect, from the other facts, which might not be in accordance to what you want, but basically part of the whole scenario, and you need those both sides of the picture to basically form a good view, to form a good judgment for a very important decision. So if you are only getting one side, I think that also, once you grow up, you will have a challenge in reaching out and accepting the other point of view. And I think a lot of polarization which we are seeing in United States, especially in Charlie Kirk episode that has happened, we have seen a lot of polarization, political polarization lately that has happened within the countries and even between the countries, is that people are only getting information based on what they want to see, and they are not looking at the other aspect of the information that might influence their judgment to get more balanced, get more moderate point of view. And hence, I think one of the reasons for this gyration of political polarization, that is especially we are seeing in West, or right wing on one side is, and then you have a very extreme left wing. I think is partly, not wholly, partially being fueled by the, or driven by the social media, because that is what you get if you are if you are right wing mega supporter, then that is what you are going to get in your feed. You are not going to get the, basically, if Democrats are doing something good and that has to be accepted, you're only going to get very extreme negative feed. So I think these are the 4 or 5 areas which I think probably is already having negative effect on the cognition, on the psychology, on the mental well-being, and obviously that is going to have long-term consequences in every other aspect of life.
So thank you very much. Now I'll be handing it over to Munib for the rest of the questions.
Okay, sir. To my question to you would be, what advice would you give to young people to keep themselves from suffering due to social media?
So regarding this, I think one, I'll take this as a more holistic solution. I think it is not a matter of only advice. What advice I would give? I think first of all, it is a regulatory issue which the policymakers at the national level has to see. And I can give you one example that Australia already has banned, or they are about to put in place, that anyone who is below 16 cannot have a social media account. So Australia has already gone in that direction, and you will see that in other European countries, you would see they would have a similar kind of regulations kicking in. And we can see that even in the United Kingdom, for instance, Hugh Grant, who's a famous actor right now, leading a campaign of limiting mobile phones and social media use in schools. So I think one aspect which is very important, and that has to be, because you will always have every kind of parent, you will always have every kind of kids, obviously, but there has to be a regulatory aspect to it, where the governments have to step in and they have to manage that who should be able to get the account or not. So I think one is the regulatory. The second is obviously is that as a parent, or as an elder person, you have to advise them, you have to talk to them, obviously, but more important, I think it is that what they see, obviously what kids see is what they're going to do. If they used to be very old, much before you guys were probably born. There used to be on Pakistan television network, there used to be an ad about smoking, and the ad was that there was a father who was smoking, and then the son, a very young kid, basically starts to imitate. And the message was that if you're going to smoke at home, your children are going to imitate that. Similarly, if the parents are going to spend most of the time on the social media making these videos, we should not expect children should to do otherwise. So it has to be our own, that what they see at home. And if we want children and the youth to moderate their use of screens, then we have to moderate our use of screens. And there was, I think, in this this section this issue of Economist magazine, which came on this weekend. There are, I think, a couple of articles which says that that people are concerned about the young increasing use of social media among young people. It is not only young people, but it is also the older generation which is even using it more, basically. And they were basically pointing out to the people who have retired and the pensioners, and they said that that's the biggest growing segment of population that is using social media because they have money and they have a lot of time, and they probably are spending much more time on their mobile phones. So answering your question, I think it is not about advice. I think it is about behavior. Seeing is believing. If what you see at home, that is what you are going to absorb, and that is what you're going to manifest outside. So if you want the children to moderate the use of social media, I think you have to use, the parents and elders in that household have to moderate the use of mobile phones and social media themselves.
Okay, so the next question that I will be asking you is, what are the signs that an individual is getting harmed by the excessive use of social media?
I think it's the isolation. I think isolation is the biggest sign. Isolation is the biggest sign of. I think it is one of the biggest is the biggest symptom of a bigger issue, a bigger mental issue. And I think if someone is spending hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours in front of mobile phone, we all do actually, and that is probably, I don't know if there's a more meta research that is, and probably social media companies would already have that information, and that would have that data, that how that is affecting our mental well-being. So in terms of the mental well-being, I think it is the amount of the time which you spend. And if you are spending a lot of time, that is one sign. If for instance I have a kid and he's spending most of the time on social media, that should, as a parent or an elder, that should kind of flag to me that basically there is not something right. I have seen kids myself sitting on the tennis court where you are there to basically play tennis, but they are playing. They're just looking at their mobile phones, and instead of participating in a game, just spending time on the mobile phone. So what else more sign basically the elders need to have? And so one is this. The second is obviously is in terms of the isolation, in terms of their behavior. How isolated are they? How many friends they have? What kind of meaningful connections or meaningful relationships do they have? What do they talk about? What they don't talk about with their elders, with their siblings? And so all of these are signs. And but as I said, that usually the anxiety, which ultimately can lead to depression, self-esteem issues, all of that, if you read all of those stories that have been reported in media that culminated in very, very serious consequences, you would see that one thing that was common in all those stories, and this is in Western media, was the isolation that that individual basically was experiencing and was manifesting. And it was gradual, and then it became very adverse. And in that adverse, basically, instead of coming out and connecting with the real people, they keep on engaging. They kept on increasing their interaction on social media through other people, and hence not reaching out, not getting that mental support, mental health support. So isolation, I would say, of a person, especially at a formative age, and their behavior with other kids would be a sign of if things are on the right track, or things need to be brought on the right track.
Okay, so my last question to you will be, in your opinion, what aspect of social media has the most significant impact on young people's mental health?
I think it's the same. The three or four areas which I said. Overall, you need to reach out to, because you are isolated. That is how they make money. This is how the whole thing is. So the whole thing is that you should spend more time on these real time on the screens. More you are on screens, more is your the viewership, more likes, dislikes. That's how the whole social media makes money. So one is obviously is that how isolated does it make you, and based on that, then obviously is the overall, either you are able to make meaningful relationships. You go out with friends, you spend time one to one with family, friends, rather than just spending time on the mobile phone. As I said, the second obviously is even the experiences. We have seen that when you go out to different countries for tourism, you see that you would be in Paris, but people would still be spending, and tourists basically, you can see tourists, and they would be spending time on the mobile phone rather than basically absorbing different kind of experiences, which you are basically, if you are visiting Paris, then you should look at Paris rather than just spending time time on the mobile phone. This is again, and there are tourism studies which have been done, which says that if you spend, those who put their mobile phone in pockets tend to get 20 to 30% more experience from a tourist destination as compared to those basically who are just spending more time on mobile phones. So again, you get less meaningful interaction, less meaningful experience, and that again has to have some kind of impact on your mental well-being. And then, as I said, lack of focus, I think, is going to be a very big problem in coming years. If you can't put yourself, if you can't at least block distractions and focus on a task for 30 minutes to 60 minutes at least, the people are going to be in a lot of trouble, because most of the tasks require a lot of focus and a lot of attention. And then the last is sleep. If that's going to affect your sleep, and then that is going to have mental aspects to it, and all of this then again translate into what you already said, into self-esteem issues, into anxiety issues, into in extreme cases into depression. And again, I think because you are already doing research, you would already have access to many studies that have been done, which basically lay out this, that these 4 or 5 are paths, are different paths, which basically ultimately lead to the negative aspects of the social media. Again, I have already laid out the positive aspects, but frankly speaking, I think, in my view, again, I might be wrong, but in my view, at the young age, the youth, which you have, the age category which you have specified, I think the negative aspects of social media outweigh the positive aspects. Um, uh, though you might have a different point of view, but this is my point of view, because and even frankly, again, this is my point of view, that even on the long run, if you stretch it to all social groups, it's just an entertainment. It's just a form of entertainment, frankly. Has a zero bearing on productivity, has a zero bearing on anything else. Yes, you get to have these snippets of good information, but that snippets of good information which can improve best practices, which can improve your life. You previously were getting it through books, you were previously getting through magazines, which has some kind of editorial control. Now you have nothing, and now you have all kind of information. Basically, there's no filter. So this is my personal view, maybe more pessimistic, but from my point of view, I think in terms of productivity, social media has not, apart from, and all this productivity in terms of the influences, all of that, to me, in actual, there is no substantial improvement in productivity. It's all information, and much of that information is just noise. But that is my point of view. Obviously, people differ and they have different point of views. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your responses. I will be handing over the next questions over to Anaya.
Hello, sir. My name's Anaya, and my question to you would be that, in your opinion, what approximate age group is most affected by social media?
I think it's the same age which you said. I think anything below 16. I would say anything, and this is basically, as I mentioned, that Australia already has legislated that anyone who is below 16 is not going to have a social media account. I think EU is also probably is working on a similar legislation, or their framework. They are already thinking about on the similar lines. So for me, anything below 16, it should, the social media as well as mobile phones should be very much moderated. And even video games, if you look at China, for instance, China had a massive crackdown last year on the video game cafes and all of that, and they said that, and the whole idea was that children are spending a lot of time playing video games. Like, I also have spent a lot of time playing video games when I was growing up, but we all know that too much of it, what kind of negative effects it can have. So I think, as far as your question, which age group, I would say anyone below 16. And this is not, I'm the only one saying it, is, I think, already being accepted, acknowledged by more enlightened authorities in more enlightened countries, where they feel that anyone below 16, their exposure to social media should be moderated.
Okay, sir. So the next question is that, what are some healthy habits that can be implemented to stay mentally well while using social media?
I, That's a good question. That is, and it's a hard question. It's that, it is like, I would just give an analogy. If you ask me that, if you eat too much sugar, how can you moderate eating sugar so that it remains healthy? Sugar in any quantity is not healthy. Frankly, I think this is, again, there's a lot of research in that. Refined carbohydrates in any form, be it small or more, is not good for your body. So I think it's the same kind of because it gives you so much latitude in information which you get, and you are so free to basically choose, which has positive aspects also, that it's very difficult to say that, how I would basically do that. I think probably, for your relevant study, I think the discussion with children, giving them, basically kind of having a discussion about what they should, basically what is good for them, what is not good for them. Obviously, having that discussion at house, that what is the outcome, what is good for them, what would have a negative effect on them. I think that is the whole. But again, it is again very difficult, if you ask me, to moderate, if you have completely access to all kind of content on the internet, as well as um, the negative to positive. I think it is much, then you leave up to the individual, basically, to make up his or her mind. So I don't know, basically, to how to answer this question. It's just like, that if you put a cake in front of me and say that how you plan to eat it, it would be very difficult for me to give you a very straight answer.
Okay, sure. So the last question is that over the years, has the rise of social media platforms resulted in an increase of mental health issues such as anxiety or depression?
I think there are studies. I think there are studies already. If you and you again, you would have already come across those studies. Those studies, now these are documented studies which put in terms of the percentage of social media use versus the increase in the anxiety, as well as the well-being of the children, kids, youth, and even, I think, even adults also. I think it is not limited to adults are also as vulnerable to mental health issues as kids. The only thing, obviously, is that we have core worldview is already in view, and we obviously have much. It's obviously much more open for an adult to go out and seek medical support or talk to friends and talk to family than a kid, because obviously they themselves, at that stage when they are growing up, they are having their own issues and they are having their own challenges. So, but again, I think this is already kind of documented. And I think the only last thing which I would add is that it's going to get even worse. And I'm saying is that now the whole social media business model was based on algorithms. And those algorithms basically studied your behavior and based on that gave you that content. Now you have artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence is brilliant if you look at what we have today, not what we would have in the next 5 years, but even what we have today in terms of Grok and in terms of Chat GPT, brilliant. So once you have the AI basically managing all the contents, designing all the content, and especially instead of algorithms deciding which user should get what, you would have much bigger problem getting off social media, and as well as at that time it would become even more difficult to distinguish what is right information from what is wrong information. So I think this is just the beginning of the problem. I think as we go forward, as the tech industry is becoming more and more smarter, we human beings are basically, in the end, we are dumb. We all basically do very irrational things because of this is how we have evolved. So I think this challenge is going to become more and more, and let's see, basically, and here that is why I said that the governments have to step in to regulate the tech industry, so that the social as well as mental, economic, and the political impact of all these changes which are happening in very fast in last few years, they can be basically somehow moderated and can be directed in the right way.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much for the amount of insightful knowledge you've shared. I hope we haven't taken too much of your time today. So in the end, I believe that all the answers provided are going to be very helpful for our studies and our own research. So before we end, I would like to thank you very much for taking the time to partake in this interview.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Munib, and thank you, Anaya. Thanks a lot, and good luck.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.